We have a rewards program, and for our UK rewards program, our gold and platinum tiers, which are the top 2 tiers of a 4-tier program, receive unlimited next day delivery. And we've extended that recently to their exchanges as well. So they're free anyway for all UK customers to exchange, but it means that they're still receiving their next day delivery on their exchanges too.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX.
Hello and welcome to the Inside Commerce podcast, sponsored by Shopify. Today's episode, for today's episode, we're joined by Samir from Loop and Emily from Opoly, and we're going to talk a little bit around, return strategy in general, but also paid returns and how Opoly have implemented paid returns and some of the impact, and then also how Opoly are using some of the other new features within the Loop platform. So maybe just to get us started, Emily, do you mind starting us off with a bit of an introduction, and then we'll ask you to do the same, Samir?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Emily. I'm the customer experience lead at Opoly. I've been in customer experience for the past 4 years and in the company for 6. And I help look at the customer's end-to-end journey, all the different touch points, and gather customer feedback through and essentially work on delivery returns and the on-site experience. They're the main 3 touch points that I kind of look at. So returns being a major part of customer journeys. Hence why I'm here today to chat about returns.
Perfect. And then Samir?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Samir. I'm from Loop. I'm on our product marketing team. I'm based in the States, but work with a lot of our Loop's UK-based team, as well as our merchants there. And yeah, really excited to chat with you all today about returns. If you aren't familiar with Loop Returns, just a quick background. We're a returns and exchange platform for Shopify brands. And so Shopify is invested in us and was a part of our Series B. And so we kind of like to see ourselves as that premier returns partner for Shopify brands. And our claim to fame was really going hard at exchanges and kind of pushing that a return doesn't have to mean a refund, and a return could be something you see as an opportunity in the customer journey as opposed to, a headache, which is what most people see returns as.
Perfect. And I should thank you and Emily as well for persevering with this episode. We started mapping out about 3 months ago, and my lack of organization has meant that we're in 2025 recording it. But we got there in the end. And then first question. So this is for you, Samir. So I think everyone, or at least 2024 was the year of paid returns. So there was a lot of discussion in the industry and the ecosystem around this area, and a lot of big brands moved towards charging for returns. Can you talk us through how this impacted Loop and what you saw across the industry?
Definitely. Yeah, it's something we were noticing as well towards the start of 2024. I believe now at this stage, over 60% of Loop merchants are charging for a return in some way. And that's about a 45% increase from if we go back to the pandemic, I think, when everyone was optimizing for everything should be convenient and free and make it as easy as possible. And so it's definitely been a shift in the market. And I think it's obviously because operating costs are so high, shipping is expensive, warehousing costs are expensive. And I think shoppers are getting a bit more savvy about returns as well. We're seeing the rise of practices like bracketing and wardrobing, where you will order a bunch of things or order a couple of the same item in different sizes, knowing you're going to return them, or you plan to wear something for a night out and see if you can return it after. Things like that are on the rise, and shoppers are unfortunately abusing some of those return policies. And so it's making operating costs high, and that kind of brought about, I think, the more popularity of return fees. I think we've seen really big brands embrace this, like Zara a few years ago. I know ASOS this past year, and that was a big if they're doing it, then maybe we should be doing it for a lot of brands. And so, yeah, it's definitely something we've been seeing grow. And how that's changed Loop's strategy in terms of our product is it kind of gave us the signal to maybe lean a little bit more into that. So if 6 months ago we were talking, we have a fee structure that you can coordinate based on the outcome of the return. So what we would recommend to a lot of brands is, hey, give a free exchange, but charge for a refund. So you're trying to push a shopper to that desired experience of an exchange instead. But we were hearing from a lot of our brands that they wanted to kind of leverage this concept of return fees even more. And so that led us to a new product recently called Offset. I don't know if you want me to get into that right now, Paul, but basically just a different way of charging fees that we can touch on.
We've got a question on that later on, so let's leave that one.
Oh. So many questions, so little time on returns. This is really interesting. We did a pod where we touched upon it last year about what fair usage means. So it's interesting to hear where you're seeing the driver for this. So a question related to that is, we know that lots of retailers are charging for returns, but they're starting to think about what fair usage means and when it's valid to charge and when you shouldn't, because you don't want to alienate customers. I guess we can then come back to you after, Emily, on the brand perspective on this. Is so, Samir, from your point of view, working with loads of merchants, how have you seen it impact their people's metrics, like particularly on new customers? One of the big concerns is, well, you're just going to put new customers off because they perceive this as a barrier to purchase.
Definitely. It's definitely something of concern, I think, when you go from not charging for returns to then trying to implement that strategy. It's something that, shoppers might be surprised by the first time they see it, might have a little bit of negative feedback, but we have seen that the overall impact of a brand doing this is little to none. We saw that the return rates remain stable for brands who previously were doing free return policies and then implemented a fee. And then we also saw that their repeat purchase rates remain stable as well. So I think it's expected to maybe get a little bit of negative feedback from customers initially, but then the overall impact of that is it's not really affecting the rate of the return or the rate of those customers coming back to you. And I think we've also seen that customers are becoming more willing and aware of return fees. I think as they become popular with merchants, we're also seeing more customers admitting that they have already paid a return fee or they're willing to pay a return fee. And that usually comes with a good return experience. So if you're making it easy for the customer, if you have a good drop-off experience, things like that, then they're more willing to pay for that return, as opposed to if you're making it, a headache for the customer as well, then they're going to be really upset about needing to pay.
Emily, you've moved to charging for returns, and this may not fall under your remit, but I guess as a business, what level of impact have you seen from new customer, but also customers in general, in terms of, as James says, the kind of trade impact and customer perception?
Yeah, so we've had return fees in place for our international customers for quite some time now. I think since we had a specific portal for them to go to and return. But in terms of UK return fees, I think we introduced fees around 3 years ago. And we've kind of iterated on that since we introduced them. And I think the impact, honestly, what we've learned is to just keep it simple for the customers. Simple, flat fee, keep it fair, keep the return policy as straightforward as possible. And in doing that, then the kind of feedback that we have from customers and kind of the reaction based off that that decision isn't as bad as if you were to make like quite a big, bold change overnight. And like you said, Samir, like you touched on how customers are more accustomed to their favorite brands and are now in store and online charging fees, such as Zara, I know you mentioned, which, like you said, a lot of brands have kind of followed suit from that. So I think it's almost an expected part of the return journey now, especially coming into this year. I know last year there were a lot of changes that took place in ecom. So I think customers are definitely more accustomed to it. And And it's something that it's definitely been a learning curve for us. So, and also since we've introduced things like store credit and exchanges for our UK customers, we are able to keep those return methods free to obviously move the needle in customers' option for those return outcomes over a refund. So we currently only charge for a refund and for a return fee if it's a UK refund, and then international fees have remained somewhat the same, but then we've also been able to offer cheaper return methods with store credit as well. So although we're charging for fees for returns, we've been able to kind of play around with the different outcomes and offer some benefits elsewhere so that they're still able to exchange and offer store credit at a reasonable rate as well.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Great. And then to Samir's point earlier, I do think that having that charge in place will also increase the likelihood of someone exchanging, as you say. And I've done that behavior for my fiance, who is a Siri. Well, she's a bad customer, basically. So one quick sub question. So currently, do you have a blanket rule around charging for returns? Or do you, for example, like more loyal customers or even returning customers, do you treat that differently?
Yeah, so we offer for new customers their first return free, mostly so that they can kind of gauge our sizing and things like that. And then we have a rewards program, and for our UK rewards program, our gold and platinum tiers, which are the top 2 tiers of a 4-tier program, receive unlimited next day delivery. And we've extended that recently to their exchanges as well. So they're free anyway for all UK customers to exchange, but it means that they're still receiving their next day delivery on their exchanges too. So we have that in place, and as I mentioned, the first return free, but we've steered away from offering the customers in the higher tiers of our rewards program free refund returns, because they do have the unlimited next day, and the type of behavior that we want to hopefully try and avoid from a sustainability point of view as well, but also from a business perspective, is ordering lots of things on next day delivery and then just returning them all. We want to try and avoid that type of behavior, but whilst also being able to offer some benefit for the loyal customers in those tiers as well.
Question I got for you, Emily, because your role is broader, obviously much broader than returns. Returns is a subset of a wider customer experience strategy. And the things that I speak to a lot of businesses about is historically, and I think in most businesses, returns are seen as like a policy and a need, and right, we've got to do it, and it's a cost. And when something's a policy and a cost, you don't invest in it, you just try and handle it and mitigate cost. When you flip the switch on that and go, actually, this is part of customer experience, this is a service, services get treated differently and they get invested in and they get prioritized, and you think about how you deliver them. I'd love to know, like, what was the Poly lens on this? What advice can you give to people about how you can get people to think about returns more strategically in a business so that they don't end up just going, right, we need to minimize cost and we just need to have a functional service?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm always customer first. So the main thing is to gather customer feedback. So we run focus groups on certain topics, returns obviously being one of them. I think it's key to gather customer feedback before you make decisions and not just after the fact as well, so that you can hear your customers out. Obviously, in an ideal world, everyone's going to say, yeah, I want free returns. Done, dusted. But it doesn't work for an e-commerce business. So I think it's really like understanding the customer feedback, taking that on board, feeding that back to all the relevant departments. So as part of my role, I run the Voice of the Customer program. And so each month we'll have a meeting with key stakeholders, and kind of like the decision makers from each department, and we'll go through the feedback and come up with like a bit of an action plan from it. So I think we're fairly decent as a company in terms of looking at that feedback and actually actioning things off the back of that. I think the worst thing you can do is get customer feedback and not actually let anyone like feed that back to the relevant people and do anything from it. Just have it stored. Like, what's the point? So I think trying to encourage that customer centric mindset, so that when we are looking at things like, when I'm having meetings with finance about the numbers and, okay, well, how can we, reduce returns and this and that? I think it's good to have the quantitative data, but also the qualitative data, and think about the impact on brand reputation as well and brand image. So yeah, sometimes it can be a battle to kind of like what's best for the business, but ultimately the customers are the business. So it's about weighing those things up and trying to come to like a happy medium where the customers aren't going to be annoyed with new policies that are coming into play, but then they're also trying to move the needle with reducing refunds and trying to be strategic about things as well. It's a balance. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess one quick question actually before I move on to the next one. How do you collect that feedback as well? Is it something that you send as part of a loop return, or do you have like end-to-end NPS?
Yeah, so we look at NPS, of course, in surveys. So we have surveys sent out at different touch points of the customer journey. So we have on-site feedback after the customer's placed their order, after the order's been delivered, and then after any return or exchange is being processed. So we have it at the various different touch points. We track return NPS versus, online UX NPS and all those various things. So that's our main kind of stream of feedback that we get through and analyze and set actions off the back of. But then we also look at things like Trustpilot, super keen on our trust score and try to tackle any issues that come off the back of that. And then I have obviously worked really closely with customer service as well at the tickets coming through and making sure that we're tagging them and understanding the different, like the common topics that are coming up if they are to do with returns. So they're kind of the main streams of feedback that we receive. And then, as I mentioned, focus groups, definitely want to run more focus groups this year as well, because it's completely different having that open dialogue as well with customers and getting more information from them, loyal customers, trying to incentivize for, maybe the first time customers, lost customers as well. So really trying to understand different perspectives as well, and not just from one customer group that are replying to the surveys that we're sending out. And then we're also looking at new ways to gather feedback this year, because I do think that sometimes surveys can become a bit stagnant and customers don't always want to complete that sort of traditional method of leaving feedback. So we're also going to look at things like voice and video feedback and how we can kind of use that and analyze that.
Great. Yeah, I think it's really cool that the Opoly have got your role in the business. Actually, you don't see it with too many brands. Like, there's obviously different departments that will collate feedback and analyze feedback. But I think having that person in that role is a really good way to like build the kind of championing of these areas. And so now coming back to you, Samir, because I realize we haven't spoken to you for a little while, which isn't intentional. So you've recently introduced offset, or the ability to offset returns as part of the purchase journey. Can you talk us through what this is and how it works?
Yeah, definitely. So kind of off the back of the trends we were seeing of, brands adopting return fees so much, consumers being more like Emily was saying, more of an expectation that, that's something you'll probably have, and just being more willing to pay. What we saw kind of picking up a little steam in mainly in the US market was this concept of returns coverage, or almost like shipping insurance or trip insurance, of when you're going to actually place your order, paying a smaller fee to ensure a free return later. So, for example, if a brand has a £10 return fee, maybe you give the option of only paying £2 at checkout, and then you don't have that fee later if you do return. And so what we see is this is really kind of a win-win for all parties. I think for the brand, it's a way of getting a little bit of extra money to cover your operating costs up front, as opposed to only at the time of the return. And ideally, you have more people paying this small fee than are actually returning, because they want that peace of mind, and hopefully they'll like their item and they don't need to return. But it does give that assurance. And then for the customer, I think exactly what I was just mentioning, of kind of gives that peace of mind of, especially if you're shopping with a new brand, trying it for the first time, or you don't know your size, or maybe they dropped a new collection and you want to try that out. Things like that. It kind of gives you that peace of mind of knowing, okay, I can try this item, and if I don't like it, I have that option of a free return later. They can still return even if they didn't pay that small fee up front, but then they will be more on the hook for, the label cost or the larger return fee. And it kind of, I think it also educates the shopper a bit more of knowing, like, hey, you're being transparent up front of, hey, if you don't pay the small fee, there will be a return fee. It's for restocking, for Emily even mentioned the sustainability aspect. I think consumers are more aware of that as well. And so kind of educating them a bit on, returning isn't a desired outcome, but it is still something you're able to do, and we're making it easy for you to do that.
Interesting. And I guess, Emily, then let's take the merchant lens on this. Have you put this in, what take up have you seen and what impact? And I guess a sub question for me would be, one of the key things we're all trying to achieve in this industry, right, is fair usage. And we're trying to reward customers for good behavior, but also stop people taking advantage and adding crippling costs to retailers so they can't service the good customers. If I'm a bad customer, I'll probably look at this and go, oh, do you know what? I'll pay the £2 and I'll just send everything back and I won't have to pay £10. So I'd love to know where you see it as a merchant and what you're seeing from a customer behavior.
Yeah, so we haven't added offset to our return journey at the moment, but I think it's a really interesting thing. And it's obviously very new. I've never seen this, never seen any of the companies kind of have this before for returns. So I would be really interested to see what the uptake and the results are across other brands who are currently using offset, because having it been like a new thing, I wouldn't know even how customers would kind of take that, and also the different markets as well. Like, I don't know whether it's something that would be more popular in certain regions, like in the UK versus the US, or vice versa. So I think it'll be really interesting if you do have any data, Samir, maybe not right now, but at some point, if you can share that with me, that would be really interesting to see the uptake. I think from a customer experience point of view, or from a customer perspective, like, I agree with you there, James, like the barge, however we're kind of classing the barge customer, might see that and think, oh, great, I'll get a cheaper return, especially if it's something like they've done it once and then they go, okay, well, it's always going to be cheaper, I'll do it again. But then again, I know that Loop are quite good with how you can tweak your policies with workflows as well to kind of prevent abuse of certain features like that. You can do that with various other things in Loop, like bonuses, store credit or exchanges, things like that. So I'm guessing potentially there would be a way to kind of combat abuse of that potentially. And then, yeah, from a business perspective, I guess it's kind of that extra stream of money that you have from the upfront fee. I would be interested to see how customers who don't then return, if they would ever get in touch and say, "Oh, I didn't return. Can I have that refunded?" Which is besides the point, because I guess it's a service or kind of an insurance almost, I suppose. Also, I don't know if it classed as an insurance or a service, but it would be interesting. I feel like it depends on what type of customers the brand has as well, and how they would react, how demanding they are, and kind of what they would expect. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear the customer feedback as well, if that's something that the brands are gathering from the service for customers who are using it and opting for it.
Definitely. Yeah. I know it's a relatively new concept, and I think, to your point, even more new in the UK than in the US. So I think it's something we're seeing slowly pick up and gain more traction. And definitely the customer feedback, I think, so far has been very positive, and we've been making sure this doesn't, affect the brand's return rate or make shoppers more kind of potentially abusive. And so very much monitoring how it plays with all of those things. And like you were mentioning with the workflows, you can still use all of the different customization tools within Loop. So like Emily was saying about doing free exchanges still, but charging for refunds, or giving a first-time customer a free return anyways, regardless. All of those things are still options that a brand can choose to do. So we kind of see this as just another way of charging for returns, depending on what the brand needs. If you're a brand with a really high return rate, or you have common sizing issues and people are constantly, worried about getting the wrong size, things like that, then giving that assurance up front is maybe a strategy to explore. And like Emily was saying as well, maybe even try out in a US market at first, then see how it goes, bring to a different market. But definitely a lot of different levers that you can do. We're seeing strong uptake on this right now, because how the model currently works is it's something that is set as default on in the checkout experience. So it's something that is on already, and the customer would remove from their basket if they don't want it. But if you heard from Shopify earlier this year, Shopify announced, I think it was maybe in December or early January, that all kind of upsell type add-ons in cart or checkout are having to move to a default off state. So like any sort of shipping insurance, or if you use maybe like a sustainability upsell or anything like that, and including this offset returns coverage model, all of that will be moving to a default off state. So the uptake right now we're seeing is strong, but once that change goes into effect, we're sure the uptake is going to change a little bit. So I don't want to give any like concrete numbers, but we're monitoring that. And I think we're still very confident in the value that this service provides, again, both to the brand and to the consumer. And so still feel very strongly about it.
Right. And then go back to you, Emily. So I chat to Lauren semi-regularly, and we briefly worked together, I think it was last year, maybe the year before. And I know that returns is a big focus for Opoly as a business, as it is with most fashion brands, even more so kind of lower price point fashion brands. So can you just talk us through what else you have planned for 2025, and also maybe how that differs by market? You talked a little bit around kind of nuance and consumer expectations by market.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we currently offer labels to, I think, around like 33 countries, because we ship internationally. So we want to try and expand that list to have fewer countries who are having to essentially self-post at the post office or whatever with much higher fees. So we want to be able to service those customers and provide labels just for ease of customer experience, to be honest. And then that way we can obviously avoid them having to pay higher fees themselves. And we can also provide them with a quicker return outcome. So for the international lanes that we do offer labels for, we're able to do things like trigger their outcome in transit or at drop off. So we want to be able to provide that to as many countries as possible, just for a better experience. We are also hoping to potentially expand, looking at third-party logistics in different countries, again, to offer that quicker turnaround, quicker refund time frame, and quicker processing for us as well. So we already have this in Australia and the US, so customers can return domestically, and it also means that we can reduce their fees as well, which ultimately, customer experience, like that's what I want to do. I want to make the customer happy, reduce fees where we can. And so it will be beneficial operationally as well as for the customer's experience. And then I think also from like a business perspective, looking at utilizing more of Loop's features to kind of optimize store credit and exchange rates over refund, and encouraging customers to opt for those return outcomes. I think that the overall aim, as it is every year, is to reduce returns, right? I think that this past year, although the returns, which I think Samir kind of mentioned, is across the board with brands at the moment that he's working with, I think although the returns rate overall hasn't really reduced, it's kind of stayed the same. Our refund rate has reduced and our store credit rate has increased. And that's just from iterations like tweaking return policies, offering incentives for store credit and exchanges. So I guess really just, again, focusing on that, what else we can do. So yeah, bit of everything really, but reduce return rates where we can whilst improving the return timeframes and customer experience.
One of the key areas that's always going to be difficult for selling clothing online is size, fit, getting a real feel for the product quality and the material, because it doesn't, let's face it, we all know it. It doesn't matter how good our product data is or which third-party tools you like, a True Fit or whatever it might be, to get size in. There's always a margin of error. So I'd love to know how you use returns data to help you identify issues. And because I know you said like you play back customer data, how do you as a business like take that returns data to look at whether it might be a product issue or a quality issue or something, or it might just be a data issue where you did need to put better information onto the website?
Yeah, so we have our parent and child reasons in returns, which we're able to customize to cater to our different collections. It can be product specific as well, and kind of common return reasons that we see. And we also have open text fields for certain return reasons to kind of gain additional feedback from the customers, obviously optional. And then our QC team will look at these Loop reports. They can do it by various things, by SKU, by variant, by specific collections, sizes, etc., all within the Loop dashboard. And then they can use that data monthly to kind of draw any key issues or patterns that they're seeing with particular garments, and popular return reasons for that garment, whether it's quality or too big, too small. And then they feed that back to the design and product teams. So we've got that kind of process in place, looking at customer feedback in the return data and their return reasons. And then kind of to help support that, we also look at things like our product reviews as well. And then we kind of use a combination of the return reasons in Loop and the product reviews to gather the fit. So like we have a true to fit sort of slider on the product page where for like, oversized, too small, just right kind of thing to help customers make that decision. Because you're right, like one of the hardest things, and it's different brand by brand, is sizing and trying to get that right on your order. And we want to, where possible, avoid customers ordering multiple sizes and then just returning off any that don't fit. So yeah, I think Loop definitely helps with looking at at that side of the feedback. And we do try to update our product pages with as much information as possible on sizing, fit, things like if the product's sheer, even like if the lighting's different in certain like photo shoots that we do, so the product might have a slightly different color. We try to be as transparent as possible on the product pages to reduce returns. And then we also have the likes of True Fit to help customers with their sizing as well.
Great. And then coming back to you again, Samir. So Loop are obviously, a market leader in the return space. I know you've got some really big merchants in North America and also the UK. Amongst those merchants, and I guess also generally within your roadmap, what are the big trends that you're seeing around returns going into 2025?
Definitely. I think specific to the UK market, we're seeing more brands lean into exchanges and seeing returns as an opportunity. I think what a lot of brands' mindset was maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, was returns as just, kind of we were talking about earlier, like a necessary evil, like you just have to do it. And so, Emily, I know even like Opoly before coming to Loop a few years ago, we're servicing refunds, but not servicing kind of self-serve exchanges online. And I think that's something we've seen more brands look to do going into this year. And so it really creates that opportunity within the returns flow of you're opening that door to retain the revenue and keep it within your business, as opposed to just getting the return done, getting rid of the support ticket and offering the refund. You create that nice touch point in the customer journey that almost makes it feel like shopping again. And so the impact of that is only a benefit of, especially if you're a brand that is currently only offering refunds, by opening that door again, there's only upside to that of keeping that money within your business. And I know it's been really impactful for Opoly so far as well. I think other than that, the other big trend that we're seeing is kind of similar to the topic of we've been talking about of part of why return fees has become a big thing is because of, policy abuse and shoppers maybe taking advantage of return policies a bit more and, doing practices like ordering a bunch of items in different sizes and then knowing you're going to return. And so we have built a machine learning AI model to kind of proactively identify potentially fraudulent returners or return abusers. And we can give that information to brands to help them fine tune their return policies and kind of, again, maybe place some strategic guardrails around shoppers that are doing practices like that, but keep the experience really seamless and convenient for your good shoppers that, are not taking advantage of your policies. I would say those are the two big trends.
It's a real sensitive balancing act, isn't it? Because it's hard, because as a brand, you've got to be commercially viable. Otherwise, you can't service your customers, which means you have to manage costs sensibly. But managing costs means making tough there's And I guess, Emily, there's I kind of got a final question. It's quite a wordy one, but it's about that if you keep your eyes on a fair usage policy, you're going to have to make some hard decisions. And I'm sure you already are, about not allowing returns or blocking customers from shopping. How do you approach it? Because you're trying to deliver customer experience, and that's almost like the antithesis of it. But actually, you have to do that to protect good customer experience. So, strategically, how do you as a business approach this? Is it about stopping people from buying who are bad customers? I don't mean that in a nasty way, but fundamentally, some people are bad customers. Or is it more about making people just pay for that behavior?
So I guess when we're talking about bad customers, I guess it's really like how we're classing bad customers. Like, are we looking at return behavior versus fraudulent returns? And I think there's a real distinct difference, and we don't want to kind of bundle those customers together. So I think that we treat those two different things very, very differently. So And obviously we have to be fair. So we've, as I said, last year, we kind of tweaked different return policies to try and encourage or discourage returns, I should say, from bad returns behavior. But I think we it was a learning curve, and we kind of learned the hard way from customer feedback how not to do it and how not to approach it. And we've gotten into quite a good place now again with getting better customer feedback and with our policies. So I think really with the returns and bad behavior, I think we are restricted as an e-commerce brand with fair policies. We are restricted to what we can do and how we can discourage that behavior. I think where we can really make more of an impact is with the fraudulent returns. So, customers not returning what they said they've returned, returning non-Opoly items or, random things and saying it's their Opoly return. There are more things that we can do with that to try and reduce that type of behavior. So, we have kind of, I suppose, safeguards in place for returns in transit. We have value thresholds in place. We are also looking into different ways that we can QC the items and see what's been returned at drop off, rather than, having the refund processed in transit or drop off and then it getting back to us and not being, what we're expecting back, or worn, dirty items, things like that. And then in terms of kind of blocking customers, again, we have to be really careful with returns behavior versus fraudulent. You can't necessarily block customers from shopping, again, if they have a bad return behavior, but on fraudulent, if they're just returning lots and have like a really high return rate. We've seen other brands kind of look at that and do that in the past, but we're just going up against with kind of what our advice and what is actually deemed fair. But we can block customers if they are fraudulent, and we have proof of fraudulent returns behavior. So it is a balance. And we also don't want to put any kind of blanket policies in place or things that are going to be detrimental to our loyal customers and customers who we want to return. So is it not return their clothes, but to return to the website to buy more? And so, yeah, it's really difficult. It's not an easy one. It's complex. And, we don't want to punish the good customers by putting something in place to avoid the bad, quote unquote customers. It's a balance in that.
I think that's a really, really nice way of summarizing this episode it's brands have got to take returns seriously and see it as a proper service, not a cost. And you've got to stress test the policy on different customer groups to make sure you're not alienating people. And that's a great one. And it's not easy, is it? I think that's the thing. If it was easy, it would be resolved years ago, but it's not. It's an ongoing effort. And what I like is that you're constantly looking at the data, you're looking at the customer feedback. You're not just seeing the numbers from a cost or a revenue point, or whatever it might be. You're looking at the impact on the customer satisfaction, and it's tied up that journey that's critical.
Yeah. And I think it's great talking to other brands about this topic as well, because it's such a massive topic and every brand's kind of feeling it, especially since COVID. I feel like customers are returning more. So I think it's good to keep the discussion going with other brands and kind of seeing what they're doing and how they're tackling the situation. But I do think that Loop enables us to kind of play with different ideas and think of more creative ways to tackle the situation, rather than just putting fees up and essentially annoying our customers, which is the last thing we want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Look, really appreciate that. That's when we could sit and ask and debate the merits of different approaches for hours. That's what I love about it. But for those listening, I hope this has given you food for thought. And for those of you working within retailer or e-commerce teams, there's some really good insights here into how a leading brand, along with their technology partner, is approaching this. If you want to find out more, we've got Emily's contact details on the landing page. if you want to learn a bit more about Loop and how that portal and the tech works to support in returns management, then also you got Samir's details as well. Do reach out. And always feel free to tap up me and Paul for any questions. So Emily Samir, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is great.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.